Welcome back everybody. Today we're gonna start about something new, a series I like to call the economy of Teyvat. So in each episode I will be breaking down two major cities in Genshin Impact, looking not just at the lore but the actual numbers behind them, population, housing, jobs, food supply and what it all means if you're actually living there. In the first episode we're gonna cover Mondstadt and Liyue, two cities that could look more different on the surface but both share some pretty questionable economy problems once you start digging deeper. So let's start with the City of Freedom itself, Mondstadt. Now I know this sounds a little insane, but yes, I went through and counted them all, over all the NPC, every single NPC. Mondstadt had around 300 main residents across the region, but here's the kicker, only around 120 actually lives inside the city walls. The rest, well, they're scattered around in the outposts, small villages and random camps that you can find in the capital. When you also factor in the playable character that's tied to Mondstadt, the number bumps out around roughly 140 people who actively lives in Mondstadt and call it their home. So you expect the city to be big enough to support all of them, right? Well, not exactly. So let's talk about the housing. So here's where Mondstadt gets weird. I went around the city and I counted every single house. There are only about 27 houses in total. Each house has around 3 floors. So let's be generous and say one floor can support a family of 4 to 5 people. That gives us about 12 people per house. Okay, that's generous. Multiply that by 27 houses and you're looking at a space for about 300 people max, to maybe 380 max. At first glance it doesn't sound terrible with 140 residents. In other words, the city still has room to grow, but there's a problem. The cities aren't static. Over the years, families have kids, population rise, and Mondstadt has a big issue when it comes to expansion. The city is completely surrounded by a river. Expanding outward would be a nightmare unless they started building bridges to create new districts or pushing people out into the camps on the outskirts. And let's be real, if Mondstadt grew to double or triple its population in, it's say, the next decade, they're in a big trouble. Housing shortages, overcrowding, and eventually a demand for new infrastructure that the city just doesn't have right now. And let's jump into the food and supply. So, for a city that's supposed to be the beating heart for Mondstadt, the food market is shockingly small. If you walk through the main plaza, you notice there's really only 2 major food sources: the vendor who sells fresh vegetables and the person who actually cooks you meals. That's it, 2 people feeding in the entire city. Now remember, we estimated around 140 people actually lives in Mondstadt walls. For that population, 2 vendors is barely manageable, but it's actually cutting it close. If the population grows even slightly, the food supply chain would collapse. And it shows in game too. You rarely see a crowd of NPCs shopping for food. Most people are either hanging out near the fountain, sitting in the tavern, or just standing around aimlessly. It paints the picture of a city that's already struggling to sustain itself even at its current size. So where do actually people go in Mondstadt? There are not many places. The city has only 2 main entertainment hubs: the tavern and Angel Share, where you can go grab a drink and hang out with friends, at the Cat Tail, a cozy little tavern slash a cat cafe, where you can go and also gamble with your cards. And you know, that's it. No theaters, no festivals inside the walls, no sports area. If you live in Mondstadt, your nightfall options are basically drink until you cannot stand or gamble until you can pay your rent. Honestly, it explains a lot about Venti, to be honest. But now, here's the thing gets really rough. If we ask, oh, but what do people in Mondstadt actually do for a living? The list is shockingly low. You can be a guard, you can be a shopkeeper, but you know, good luck with that, there's only a handful of shops. Or you can gamble at the Cat's Tail. That's basically it. The city economy is paper thin. There's no evidence of major trade happening inside Mondstadt wall. No factories, no workshops, agricultural, non-existent inside the city. Everything is imported from villages and camps around the region. And what's even crazier is that gambling almost feels like a genuine career path in here, because because for many residents there's literally nothing else to do. So Mondstadt job market is incredibly bleak. If you're not a knight, a vendor, or an alcoholic bard, you're out of luck. Yeah, that's taking everything into account. Well, housing, I'll give it a nice 6 out of 10. It's fine for now, but it's definitely gonna be doomed later. Food supply is 5 out of 10. Bare minimum, no room for growth. Jobs and economy, 4 out of 10, non-existent outside of gambling and guarding. Entertainment, 6 out of 10, 2 spots only, but at least they have cute cats. Overall, I'll give Mondstadt a nice 6 out of 10. As a city, it works as a standard hub for the player, but if actually you lived in there, well, that's where you're probably gonna struggle and you're not gonna be able to live long term. But next up, let's head south to the land of contracts, commerce, and certain Archon who really should stop forgetting his wallet. Liyue Harbor. On paper, Liyue blows every other city out of the water. When it comes to size, the entire region has around 600 residents, with roughly 300 living in Liyue Harbor itself. That's way more than Mondstadt, and the city certainly feels alive. The moment you step in, crowds of NPCs fill the streets, vendors are everywhere, and the harbor feels like an actual metropolis compared to Mondstadt, tiny starter town. But bigger doesn't always mean better. Here's the catch. Housing in Liyue Harbor is an absolutely nightmare. After combing through the entire city, I could only identify about 29 houses that look remotely livable. And even then, a lot of those houses aren't even full houses. They're basically shops with a small living space crammed above them. The first floor is where the business happen, and the second floor or the third floor is where the owners, maybe with their families, sleep. So let's do the math. If we assume around 200 plus NPC actually live inside the harbor, plus 15 playable characters from Liyue, plus kids, extended families, and so on, you're looking at hundreds of people trying to fit in 29 mixed used buildings. Well, in short, Liyue Harbor is overcrowded to the extreme. If Mondstadt issue was not enough jobs, Liyue issue is nowhere to live. The housing market here would be insane. Sky-high prices, family doubling up in tiny rooms, and now a new arrivals priced out internally. But here's where Liyue shines the economy. Unlike Mondstadt, where people basically live off gambling, Liyue is an economic powerhouse. The city is full of opportunities, a bank, and yes, Child probably owns half of it, stalls of fish, groceries, produce, specialized shops for pots, jewelry, crystal, and textiles. There's traders, shipbuilders, even an actual medic, and so much more. It's a real economy with a strong division of labor. People can choose career, hone skills, and build an actual wealth. Liyue feels like it's run on contracts, commerce, and trade, exactly what you'll expect from a nation guided by the Geo-Archon of contracts. Food is also abundant. Liyue, positioned by the harbor, makes it the fishing a natural backbone of their diet, and its seafood market dominated the stores, but unlike Mondstadt, pitiful two foods vendor, Liyue has a plenty of groceries, cooked food stores, and market overflowing with variety. If you live in Liyue, you will never starve, though your wallet might. And let's not forget about the culture side. Liyue isn't just about the money, it's about the tradition, festivals, music, and religious rituals tied to Rex Lapis keep the city culture rich. The annual rite of Descension, for example, is one of the biggest events in Teyvat. That said, finance rule over everything. While Jean-Claude himself can't manage Mora to save his own life, everybody else in Liyue is a master of the money. In fact, the economy is so strong, it feels almost too stable, like the moment contracts stop being honored, the whole system could collapse. And my final rating for Liyue. So let's go. Housing is an obvious 2 out of 10. Like, it's severely crowded, not enough space. Food is a nice 9 out of 10. There's non-stop vendors all around, there's a lot of different varieties, and you're actually just not gonna starve there. Job and economy, it's a 10 out of 10. Best in Teyvat so far, tons of opportunities. And a culture and entertainment, a nice 9 out of 10. Festivals, market, tradition, everything thrives. Overall, I'll give leeway a nice 8 out of 10. It's most realistic and functional economy in Genshin, but unless you loaded with Mora, actually living here would be a nightmare because of the housing crisis. Well, that's the end of this part. I'm gonna do a part 2 going over another 2 nations. And if you like this kind of video, please leave a like, I really appreciate it, and give me your opinion if I got any information wrong, or if I should have added more information to this video. Thank you very much, have a nice day.